G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today we're looking at the Thousand Suns in this episode of Getting Started in the Horus Heresy. So, the Thousand Suns really suffered going into 2.0. A lot of how their Legion worked is gone. It's been replaced by what I would argue is a much worse system by writers who didn't do a very good job. And I know it's a very salty way to start the episode, and unfortunately there is a little bit more salt to get into, but you need to be informed up front with these episodes. I'll make no qualms about it. I've been playing Thousand Suns in some form or another since the mid-1990s, okay? I was a little kid when I started playing, and the first thing I got into was Tzeentch. And I've been playing Thousand Suns ever since. White metal, plastics, you name it. So I understand the Force, how it's played over many different editions, and how to read the rules, comprehend what they mean, and apply it on the tabletop because of, nearly 30 years of knowledge in the matter. And this Legion does not play well. Everything that you understood about them in the last edition is completely and radically different in this one. Instead of cults being an intrinsic bonus, they are now a circumstantial bonus that has big negative consequences to it. And a lot of these things are really concerning to me and the Legion playstyle. And instead of being one of the strongest Legions on the tabletop, like they were in the previous edition, they are by far one of the weakest Legions on the tabletop in this edition. Now, to go off on another mini rant, something I haven't really touched on yet is the Allies Matrix. And the Thousand Suns have a very bizarre Allies Matrix. Basically, no one likes the Thousand Suns. Some absolutely hate the Thousand Suns. But what's really bizarre here is that the Thousand Suns aren't even sworn brothers with the White Scars, despite us being told explicitly in the novels that they were. And they are the same level of ally with the White Scars as they are with the Alpha Legion fellow warriors, even though we are also explicitly told in the novels that the Thousand Suns and the Alpha Legion would not ever work together. Because the Thousand Suns completely distrusted the Alpha Legion, probably because the Alpha Legion tried to infiltrate their Legion at some point. We can only extrapolate that last thought, but yeah. So it means the force that got along best with the Thousand Suns and the force that got along worse with the Thousand Suns, completely would not work together, have the same level in the Allies chart. It just goes to show that the people who wrote this made some basic fundamental lore mistakes, and you need to remember that when you go into the actual rules of some of these legions. And that is just a great example. For those who are wondering about sourcing, obviously the Path of Heaven and Scars novels are key ones for the White Scars and their relationship with the Thousand Suns and why they had such a tight relationship with them. Also, Book 8 of the Horus Heresy talks a lot about the Scars and Thousand Suns relationship. Essentially, it boils down to the Thousand Suns and the White Scars were both outsiders, and therefore they understood each other from that standpoint. The White Scars and Thousand Suns, along with the Blood Angels, were to create the Librarius, getting Psychers into the Legions. Very important to them. And the Alpha Legion, they speak about in Book 3, I think it's Extermination of the Horus Heresy. In the Alpha Legion's own section, talks about how the Thousand Suns flat out would refuse to work with the Alpha Legion. So, yeah, bad writing. Get used to it, because this episode's full of it. Alright, so Thousand Suns Legion trait, now that we've got through the salt, is Cult Arcana. It affects cavalry and affects infantry, and they all count as psychers, essentially. You can upgrade your independent characters for 15 points to get a psychic power out of the main rulebook. It's bad. The trait offers essentially nothing to vehicles, nothing to dreadnoughts, nothing to land speeders, vehicles of any kind, really. Even vehicles have wounds. It's infantry, cavalry. That's it, flat out. Not great. Not great at all. When you have some legions, again, I will always cite the Imperial Fist because they're the most simple example where everything flat in the army gets +1 to hit on all of their bolt and auto weapons, which is the majority of ranged weapons in the game. To have that on the one hand, then to have this where it's like almost nothing gets a bonus is a bitter pill to swallow. And because the whole Legion counts as Psychers, that means the whole Legion is intrinsically weak against anti-Psyker stuff, or things that affect Psychers in some negative way, such as the Marigal Dreadnought. that Marigal is going to affect every model in this army, and the models in this army are going to have no benefits in 99% of cases when fighting against something like a Marigal. So it's a huge negative. The Thousand Suns advanced reaction now is the Fortress of the Mind. The Fortress of the Mind is an interesting one because the reaction is essentially just giving you a better invulnerable save, 3+ if you pass a psychic check, but it's done after all of the wounds occur. So you get shot, bunch of wounds come through, then your reaction is actually starting to take place. If you fail your psychic check and you get perils, then what's going to happen is, if you fail a psychic check or you get a perils, because both can happen at once, both you and the people who shot you are going to take a perils of the warp check. So take casualties, wounds, etc. But that's not going to reduce the amount of wounds that actually occur to you. It's just going to mean that like you could lose your apothecary, in theory, before the squad actually makes their saving throws. So it's a really bizarre one. And if you do fail, you still get an invul, but it's only a 5+ invulnerable, which means it's going to be of no benefit to something like Terminators. It could offer them absolutely nothing. So it's a very high-risk endeavor in that regard. So I don't think it's a very good reaction. In fact, I think it's one of the worst advanced reactions in the game, and there are many other ones you'd be better off taking in its place. Now we get to the Prosperine Arcana, and the way these work is they're a very pathetic bonus that you have to roll a psychic check for, and if you fail, then you suffer perils of the warp. That's not good, because these buffs are very situational. So Raptora, for example, when you're moving and you're within 12 inches of an enemy unit, you make a psychic check. If you pass, then you get a 6+ invulnerable save, or +1 to your invulnerable save to a maximum of 4+. So useless on Cataphracti of all kinds, useless on anything that has a 4+ invul, in fact. I'd say the 6+ invul is also useless, but pretty much the only time you're going to want this is maybe Breaches, and maybe Tartarus Terminators. Those are and Dreadnoughts. But Dreadnoughts are not going to be Psychers in this because they won't get any of those buffs. So Raptora, very, very limited capacity to use it. Pyre. So Pyre, when you declare a charge with this unit, if you pass, you get Hammer of Wrath 2, and the Hammer of Wrath counts as flame attacks. That's interesting because at first you got flame attacks, something like Salamanders might get a buff against it. No. The Salamander's Legion trait doesn't say against flame weapons, it specifically lists flamers. I know it sounds like a silly point, but because of the way they write these rules and how they define things, they have essentially said a type or category of weapon, not a type of attack. So when they said flamers are at -1 on their to wound rolls against you, as Salamanders, they're not saying flame weapons, they're saying flamers, as in flamer, heavy flamer, flamestorm cannon, hand flamer. So the fact that they're flame attacks is going to be very, very situational here, and of no benefit to some legions who you think it would benefit. And Hammer of Wrath 2 is not that great. Pavoni. So Pavoni's buff is +3 to your distance moved, and essentially ignoring any movement penalties for difficult terrain, so not rolling the 2d6 or whatever when going through difficult terrain, or any charge reduction for going through difficult terrain, anything like that. It's fine, it's one of the better ones, I guess. Corvidae, when you're making a shooting attack, essentially it's like precision shots. So as your wounds start going through, they become allocated against a single model that you choose, and essentially that model has to keep taking saving throws until they fail, and then it's removed as a casualty. Once it's removed as a casualty, then the wounds are just distributed as normal in the wounds pool. It's fine, in regards to you can keep throwing wounds at one model, but in all likelihood, it's not going to pay off for you very often, because in Heresy, most, not all units, but most, have multiple, say, special or heavy weapons. Therefore, I think the only time you're really going to be using this is to try and target, say, the sergeant of a squad. And even then, it's very situational. Then lastly, you have Athenaean. Athenaean is when your unit includes a Psyker and you use this. What you're going to do is when you do a shooting attack, you're reducing the leadership characteristic of the enemy by -1 if it's, say, pinning or morale purposes. Not too many pinning weapons available to 1000 Suns basic infantry, so I guess it's going to mostly be from causing shooting morale that it's going to apply. There will be situations where you're able to, actually do some proper pinning. Assault cannon type weapons, for example. Not many of the units that have pinning, like artillery. Artillery do not get this cult. Punisher Sicarans don't have this cult. Therefore, the weapons that would give you the most chance of actually pulling this off aren't available to the units that have the ability. And of course, the big negative is, if you fail your psychic check on any of these, it's the Perils of the Warp. So, very fringe situational benefits for massive drawback in Perils of the Warp. All in all, the cults just don't work. They just ruined them. Okay, then we get to the Warlord traits. So, the Evoker of Pain. There's a lot of pain and suffering in these Warlord traits, I've noticed. So, Evoker of Pain is traitor only. When your Warlord has this trait, when someone fails a psychic check, whether it's him or the unit he's in, you pick a unit that's within 6 inches of the Warlord, and instead of the Warlord taking the perils damage, that unit can take damage. So, if you're point blank next to an enemy unit, you can throw the perils wounds onto them, which is really cool. But 6 inches is too close. That's close combat ranges, and I would argue there are more pressing circumstances ahead for your character at that point. So, needless to say, I don't really rate how that is currently written as a Warlord trait, because it's just too close. If it's 12 inches, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, definitely. Or 6 inches of the Warlord's unit, sure. But it's 6 inches of the Warlord. Too close. Way too close. Again, close combat. That's the only time you're really going to be seeing this one pulled off. I don't like it for that reason. Magister of Prospero. So, Magister of Prospero, when you make your psychic check, you get to roll 3d6, discard the highest. That's good. Why can't it be army-wide, though? Why is it just him and his unit, the Warlord and his unit? They are so afraid of giving army-wide buffs with these Warlord traits. Warlord traits in previous editions would be like, oh, D3 units gain this ability. D3 units infiltrate, or D3 units get redeployed, or 3 units gain scoring. Really interesting Warlord traits. This edition is like, the Warlord trait's always the Warlord and his unit. And oftentimes it's just the Warlord alone. Just, painful thing. Alright, Eidolon of Suffering. So, when the Psyker uses this, he loses, essentially, the ability to use psychic powers and psychic weapons, but you get Adamantium Will 3+. Very situational. Not many psychic powers are going to be cast against your Warlord, where you'll get this 3-up Deny the Witch. But, that said, I like the rule overall, because the second part of it is, when someone does a psychic check within 12 inches of it, doesn't say successful or anything like that, any model casts a psychic power or attempts to within 12 inches of the Warlord, you roll a d6. On a 1, there's no effect, but on a 2+, the Warlord gets Rage 2. And this increases up to a maximum of Rage 4. So, really, you could do this in 3 psychic checks. So, the situation here would be essentially take your Warlord, give him a jump pack, so he can move around quickly, get a couple of units nearby to cast some psychic powers around the Warlord, get him raged up so he's got 1,000 attacks, and then just throw him down the throat of your enemy. Best way to play it. And I think that's hilarious as a challenge Warlord. Yeah, that's fun. I still think Magister Prospero is definitely the best one for a 1000 Suns player, because it's allowing you to cast the most psychic powers. Alright, moving on to the Rites of War. We have 2, the Achean Configuration and the Guard of the Crimson King. So the Achean Configuration is interesting. It's making Castellax Achaea non-compulsory troops choices. Any model within the detachment that's using the Rite of War and within 12 inches of the Castellax Achaea and suffers perils may allocate the wounds they take against a Castellax Achaea, which is interesting. And Castellax Achaea models in the detachment that are within 6 inches of a friend gain the Line and Psyker subtype. I don't think the Psyker subtype helps them at all, because they don't benefit from the Thousand Suns cults. So giving them Line in this instance is good, but giving them Psyker is just an outright negative and has 0 bonuses to Castellax Achaea. And the limitations are, the Castellax Achaea selector's troops must have more than one model, and when you're using this Rite of War, you must include at least one Techmarine Covenant, which is okay, and you must include at least one Legiones Astartes Consularis that has the Praevian upgrade. But, many buts here. Castellax Achaea do not replace Castellax, therefore a Thousand Suns Praevian must take regular Castellax or Vorax instead of Castellax Achaea as his bodyguard. Also, Castellax Achaea need to be close, really close to a Psyker, which we'll get to. Because of that, not just a Psyker who's an independent character. That means you're probably only going to have 3 of those on the battlefield. If one of them is a Praevian, then all of a sudden you are down to 2. And that's if you pay to upgrade them to Psykers, which is 15 points a model, don't forget. You're going to do that. If you're not within that very short radius, then they fall into that automated behavior pattern, which is not what you want. So it's a really cool concept, but because they changed it from within 24 inches, I think it was, of a Psyker in the previous edition, to... Well, let me double check this, I want to get it right. The rules are all over the place here. 6 inches. Yeah, it is 6 inches. So 4 times closer than the previous edition. You've got to babysit them with independent characters, or else they just sit there drooling. Terrible, terrible Rite of War for that reason. It sounds so good on the surface, but is ruined by the unit itself, which really sucks. And plus, the having to have them within 12 inches of a... within 6 inches of a Psyker means they have to be babysat in some capacity constantly by a character. If your character walks off, they lose the Line subtype, therefore they're no longer scoring. So that means you'll have characters tied up trying to babysit them at all times, or you're going to have to pay for other units of infantry to babysit them. You can't just use Dreadnoughts or something like that because they're not Psykers. Huge problems. Then we get the Guard of the Crimson Kings. The Guard of the Crimson King, controlling player can pick up to 6 units from the detachment. Now it's up to, doesn't have to be 6, but it's up to 6 units with the infantry type, and they gain Deep Strike. And when they're deployed as part of a Deep Strike assault, they get Fear 1 for the duration of that turn, which is very situational. It's something, I guess. The second effect is Sekhmet Cabals will be taken as troops in that Rite of War, but doesn't say their line, so yeah. Limitations: you must take Magnus or Isaac Araman or a Praetor upgraded to a Psyker as your HQ, and the Rite of War cannot be used by an allied detachment. Both of these Rites of War suck. The Castellax Rite of War, the Achean Configuration, is so close to being a good Rite of War. It's not funny. But that Guard of the Crimson King is just ruined. You could definitely make the argument quite fairly that the old Guard of the Crimson King in Heresy 1.0 was overpowered. But number 2 variant of it is so underpowered it's not funny. Gaining Deep Strike, but having a whole bunch of restrictions. Well, not a whole bunch of restrictions, but essentially you're gaining Deep Strike and the ability to take Sekhmet as non-compulsory troops. Like, what are you filling up all of your elite slots with to such a degree that you can't take Sekhmet? Like, so situational. If Sekhmet gained a line in this, it becomes sort of a Pride of the Legion with Deep Strike, that would make it really good. But it doesn't do that. Therefore, it sucks. Alright, the Armory of the Thousand Suns. So, Ether Fire weapons. Ether Fire used to be really cool plasma weapons. They were essentially plasma weapons with a minor buff. And that was cool because plasma weapons are good. But now, of course, plasma weapons are bad. And plasma weapons with lower strength and reduced range, 10 inches on the Ether Fire plasma pistol, Ether-Fire Blaster is 18 inches. The Ether-Fire Cannon, which is essentially a plasma cannon, is 24 inches. So you're losing 1/3 of your range on all these weapons. And the Ether-Fire Magma Cannon, which is a replacement for the Gravis Plasma Cannon, is range 36. So, yeah, they're Achean Force, which means... Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to the Achean Force in a moment. They're rending 6+. So, instead of breaching 4+, it's rending 6+. Strength 6, AP 4, they're not good. They're not good at all. About the only one that's any kind of use is the Ether-Fire Magma Cannon. And that's because it's a large blast. And a large blast, it's going to hit enough models that maybe you'll pull off rending. At least you'll hit a lot of guys. You'll force a lot of saves. And you can get it up to strength 8, as we'll explain. So it could cause some instant death in there. They suck. At least they're free now. Alright, Asphyx Shells. Asphyx Shells are essentially an upgrade to your bolt weapons. So bolt pistols and bolt guns. And there's also the Asphyx Bolt Cannon, which is an upgrade to the Mauler Pattern Bolt Cannon, essentially. So the Asphyx Bolt Pistol and the Asphyx Bolter, you drop drop down 1/4 to 1/3 of your range, depending. So Asphyx Bolt Gun is only 18 inches range instead of 24, and the Asphyx Bolt Pistol is range 8 instead of 12. It's all the same stats as normal bolt gun or bolt pistol, but it gains shred, so rerolling to wound. Meanwhile, if you're over at the Iron Warriors, you pay 1 point more, and you have more range, and your weapons gain pinning. Which of those do we think is better? Yeah, I'll let you at home decide. The Asphyx Bolt Cannon is range 24, strength 6, AP 4, heavy 4. When it was AP 3 with shred, that was really good because it could kill Marines. But strength 6, AP 4? Yeah, best thing for killing Solar Auxilia, sure. What else you got? Just, they've gutted the Thousand Suns, guys, if you can't tell from the overall negative tone of the episode. The Achaea Pattern Force Weapons. So, essentially, these are an upgrade for any model with a character rule and a power weapon. And what they're doing is they're taking a normal power weapon and they give it the Achaean Force special rule. The Achaean Force is you make a psychic check. If you pass, you get +2 strength. This affects shooting weapons, it affects close combat weapons, anything that has the Achaea Force rule. And the good thing about it, and why I like these, is there is no negative penalty. It's a safe bet. So where a regular force weapon is you make a psychic check, if you pass, you get double strength. In this case, it's just +2 strength. But there's no negative penalty. So it's always a just do it. There's no penalty. So you may as well just go for the high strength weapon. And it's just a case of, hey, 3 out of 4 times, you're going to have a higher strength. Yeah, just take a crack at it. Why not? Cool little choice. Alright, moving on from there, we get to the specialist units now. It's also interesting to note, Thousand Suns, no special HQ, no super buffed up librarian or anything like that. Yeah, that would have been nice. You got these weird consuls, like you get banner bearers for Sons of Horus, and you've got Diabolus for word bearers, and Saboteurs for Alpha Legion, and all this kind of thing. And the Thousand Suns, just no special consul. Just an odd choice. Okay, Sekhmet Terminators. Typical Elite Legion Terminator. Leadership 8, 9 on the Sergeant, standard 2 wounds, standard 2 attacks, weapon skill 5 on a Sesame Seed bun. They have Achaea Pattern Force Weapons, which is nice to start with. But they only have regular combi bolters. They're not even Asphyx upgraded combi bolters. They're just combi bolters. Odd choice, I'd say, given the fact that, you know, they are a close assault force. You think the Asphyx bolter would be good for them, but, well, Asphyx bolters is an upgrade for your regular bolt guns. It doesn't affect any of the combi bolters on your elite infantry, which is odd for an upgrade weapon. They're relentless, which you'd expect. Bulky 2, which you'd expect. Heavy, because they're cataphracti, which you'd expect. Stubborn. Stubborn leadership 9 is okay. That's okay. What's weird is they're 50 points a model. So you're talking Justirian points, but Justirian have the ability to be taken as command squads. Justirian have the ability to shoot with incredible accuracy thanks to being Ballistic Skill 5. Justirian have access to a whole host of different weapons. They've got multi-melters even, autocannons, etc., etc. Something you can make use of that high ballistic skill as well. What you're paying points for here is the fact that they can take a single psychic discipline from the core psychic powers. And is that worth it, is the question. You've got no plasma blast guns, you've got no heavy flamers, no autocannons, no assault cannons, no nothing. Even though we know explicitly in the stories that the Thousand Suns had assault cannons, we're told it in the novel A Thousand Suns, they don't even have that upgrade for the Sekhmet, which is a shame. Especially when the 40k ones have those weird rotor cannon things. Okay. You can take Power Fists, Lightning Cores, Chain Fists, and Thunder Hammers as well. Chain Fists could be useful for anti-tank. Thunder Hammers are probably just better in most situations. They can take a grenade harness as well. It's just, there's nothing really that great for Sekhmet. You're paying per model 15 points more than a real Cataphracti for the Stubborn, for the Achaea Force weapon, which is just a free upgrade anyway, and for +1 weapon skill. Not a very good unit. If in Guard of the Crimson King and that ability to synergize and get line, that would be a different story. But, yeah, not impressed. They're okay. Middle of the road. If the psychic powers go well for them in the game, they might get some use, but I think they're honestly an overcosted Terminator unit. Moving on to the Contemptor Assyrion Dreadnought. So, exact same stats as a regular Dreadnought, but Adamantium Will 4+, so if it's the target of a psychic power, it's going to be more resilient, but who cares? Psychic powers, even in 2.0, are not that common and widespread. Even the Thousand Suns player. Most psychic powers are affecting the unit casting, not the recipient of the damage of the unit casting. Therefore, Adamantium Will is a lot more situational than the previous edition. The big takeaway on it, though, is it's got the Gravis Force Blade. So it replaces the Gravis Power Fist with this Force weapon. Now, the Gravis Power Fist is a brutal 3 weapon. This is a brutal 2 weapon, but gains the Achaean Force. They're the same strength though, 9. And 9 is a very interesting strength. It's enough to instant kill Marines, it's not enough to instant kill Custodes, toughness 5 units. But there aren't a lot of toughness 5 units anymore. Bikes have lost it, and most of the stuff that is higher than 5 is toughness 6 now. Whether it's Dreadnoughts, whether it's Contemptor Dreadnoughts, Land Speeders, whatever. That's a problem because Achaean Force, you can get this weapon up to strength 11. And again, it's free, you may as well try it. But 11 is not enough to affect those instant death thresholds. So it might get you across the line against Custodes and toughness 5 units. It will not allow you to instant kill Dreadnoughts. It will not allow you to instant kill other monstrous creatures. It's not very good. And Brutal 3 arguably is better than this weapon, Brutal 2, and a slightly higher strength. Was that worth paying 25 points for over regular Contemptor? I would argue, no. You can't upgrade away that Force weapon, you're stuck with it. You can upgrade the weapons in its fist to an Ether Fire Blaster for 10 points, God why. Heavy Flamer, Graviton Gun. Graviton Gun's good. Okay, it's got, you can put a Havoc Launcher on it. Don't know how it can shoot because, you know, the headdress is kind of in the way, but you can put that on there. Maybe they're teleport missiles. They teleport through its head. Nobody really thought that idea out. You can upgrade its arm. You can get more Contemptors in the squad, and you can get it to be a regular Psyker for plus 50 points. And there's no limitation anymore on Biomancy, which is funny. So in the previous edition, this model had a limitation. It couldn't take Biomancy because it's a Dreadnought vehicle, Walker. Well, now it can take Biomancy, so you can increase its strength and toughness with Biomancy. That could be hilarious, but for 50 points? No. You're paying 75 points more than a regular Dreadnought at that point. So, overall, I would have to say the Contemptor Assyrion is bad. too many points for a bonus that's never going to help you over a regular Contemptor. You'd be better off with regular Contemptors. Save the 25 points. Then we get to Castellax Achaea. 140 points for movement 7, weapon skill only 3, ballistic skill 4, strength and toughness 6, 4 wounds, initiative of 3, only 2 attacks, leadership 8, and a 3+ save. Yeah, okay. So where do you begin? Adamantic Deflector. It can protect itself from instant death from the strength 12 stuff, I guess. Neat. You can take up to 4 additional Castellax Achaea. No points discount though. Every one of them is 140 points, same as the first. So it doesn't really incentivize you to take more. They can upgrade their Ether Fire Cannon to an Asphyx Bolt Cannon. Again, both weapons suck. So what's the incentive to take them? Part of why people took Castellax in the past, or Castellax Achaea, was they could kill Terminators with their ranged attacks. That was really good. Their main weapon is the Achaea Force Core. So they've got the Achaean Force rule, and they're strength 8, but they're only AP 3, rending 5+. And with only 2 attacks base, no rage or anything like that, they don't have enough hitting power to kill Terminators in the way that they used to. They can kill power armor, yes, but killing power armor is a very low bar to clear when it comes to an 140 point semi-monstrous creature. And I say semi-monstrous creature because the unit type is Automata. So it's not bypassing armor. It is not dealing damage in the way that it used to, and you're paying a massive points premium for it. Now the fact is, because it's a Psi Automata, models with the Psi Automata type actually have a lot of rules that go with them. So in short form, they need to be within 6 inches of a friendly psychic who's also an independent character, or else they go into a sort of programmed behavior. So that programmed behavior is really annoying. During your shooting phase and the charge phase, they must attempt a shooting attack and or charge the closest enemy within range, and must target them if possible if they're in line of sight. It's really annoying because they'll walk off objectives, they'll shoot the target you don't want to shoot at, that kind of thing. So you've got to babysit them. That means tying up your valuable HQ choices sitting in there on these units. And when you're paying, even for like the cheapest Centurion, you're still paying 65 points to make them a Psyker independent character. So you're paying 65 points for a babysitter, and you can only fit 3 in the army. Models of the Psi Automata subtype may fire all their weapons they're equipped with in shooting phase, or as part of a reaction when eligible. No different to a Dreadnought. They may fire heavy and ordnance weapons and counter stationary, even if they move. Again, no different to a Dreadnought. They ignore penalties to initiative characteristic when charging to difficult dangerous terrain, which is pretty common on these sort of units. And when using a psychic weapon to make a shooting attack from within 12 inches of them, you can use them as the originating point of the psychic attack. Overall, Castellax Achaea suck. Yeah, I don't know what more you want me to say, guys. So far, every unit in the Thousand Suns sucks, their Legion traits suck, their psychic powers suck. The only thing they're going for them is Achaea pattern force weapons. And we get to the Kennetai Blade Occult Cabal. So, 145 points, 24 points a model, you're getting a weapon skill 5, essentially you're getting a veteran, 2 attacks base, weapon skill 5, 3 attacks on the sergeant. They've all got 2 Kennetai Force swords. This is their downfall. Whilst they have things like the Mind Song of Blades, so instead of getting a Cult Arcana like the rest of the army does, they get a Mind Song of Blades, which is you make your psychic check, and if you pass, you get +1 movement, weapon skill, and attacks. Good. Doesn't affect the independent character that joins the unit, though. Which, sucks because you want to have an independent character in there to really give them more hitting power or give them some AP2 attacks, because 2 Achaea Force Swords, even on the charge, is going to max out at 5 attacks. And we're assuming that's the 2 attacks in their base profile is exactly that. It's not taking into account 2 hand weapons. So that'll get them up to 3. They'll get 4 for the charge, and they'll get +1 if they pull off Mind Song of Blades. 5 attacks each. if you get all 10 guys to pull off a charge, weapon skill 5 against regular infantry, you're going to mince them up, sure. But against Terminators and other elite infantry that they'll often see combat against, you're going to be hitting a lot of them on 4s. And that means only half of your attacks are going to get through. So if you're throwing 51 attacks down, only 25 are going to get to the wounding stage. Then strength 4, toughness 4, you're looking for 4s to wound. So about 12 of those are going to be wounds. That means you're going to get about 2 rends. That's not very good when every single attack coming back at you from the Terminators is going to kill your models. They are terrible because they are forced into the Achaea Force swords. So even though they've got swords and the Sekhmet have swords, apparently the Sekhmet swords can be swords, maces, or axes, but on these guys the swords are exactly swords. I don't know, it's a thing. They have Ether-Fire pistols or hand flamers as 1 in 5. Why? Why would you do it to yourself? And at 24 points a model, you're paying a lot of points. And, you know, other Legion elite units have Artificer armor, 2+ armor saves. Okay? This is a Psychic unit as well. You think they would have, like, an Invul save or something? No, none of that. 3+ armor save, 2 wounds. Crack missiles will delete this unit so quickly it's not funny. Like Tyrant Siege Terminators, it's going to be a meme when they fire at this unit. Overall, the Thousand Suns are awful. Absolutely awful as a Legion. There are definitely bonuses to them, though, that save them from being the absolute bottom of the tier, but they are only just above the Raven Guard. They really are. They're probably the 3rd worst Legion. But what saves them are the Warlord traits combined with Psychic HQs. If you take a Praetor, get the right Psychic power on them, buff that Praetor in some capacity, either through his Warlord trait, so 3d6 Leadership 1 is great for your Perils checks. It's going to affect him, it's going to affect his unit. And if you add other independent characters into that unit, like say a Chaplain and a Praetor together, for instance, then they are going to throw down an ungodly amount of hurt. They become a Death Star in their own right, and that is really important to stress to people, because Paragon Blade on a model with, say, Rage 4, when he charges, he could be throwing out 9 attacks, potentially more. That's huge. At AP2 at Initiative, he could wipe a squad on his own, that HQ. That is really strong. And that saves them, because the other 2 legions, the Salamanders and Raven Guard, they're my bottom picks for worst legions, they don't have anything remotely like that. So the sheer killing ability of their characters is amazing. But every single one of their special units is being written by people who don't fundamentally understand Psykers. And I really have to stress that point, because let's take the Achaean Rite of War. If your units are only scoring when they have a character near them, and you only have 3 independent characters on the table, you can't utilize the character's killing capacity. That means they have to sit near those automata, and one of those characters is going to be a Praevian, which means he's going to have his own automata. So when you're paying 100 points plus per Castellax, and the Praevian has 3, and there's a squad of 3 Castellax Achaea, you've now got 6 Castellax with a poor amount of firepower because of all the changes and the nerfs in this edition, because they hate the ability to ignore power armor. Okay, they hate AP3, they hate AP2 in this edition. Because of that, they are now stuck trying to set an objective with that character nearby so they don't do some weird behavior like running off the objective towards an enemy like loonies. And that character is babysitting them. He can't get his Castellax squad involved in close combat because he can't detach from his Castellax. So he is sitting there trying to look after these stupid models. The Tech Marine Covenant are not independent characters. They can't be detached or attached to those Castellax to babysit them, which is how it should work. So the intrinsic rules of the unit as written do not sync up with the playstyle of the Legion. Just awful, awful writing. And again, this may sound really salty and upsetting to people. I don't care. This is the reality of the situation, and these episodes are here to guide your building of these armies. You are making a poor financial investment, not necessarily a poor gameplay investment. If you think Castellax Achaea are the coolest thing ever. I mean, I think they're one of the coolest models on the table. But if you think having lots of those Castellax Achaea on the table is really cool and you just want to do it for fun, go for gold by all means. Like, don't let me take that away from you. I wouldn't dream of such a thing. But do understand you are causing massive limitations on yourself as a playstyle. And there are so many boxes you now have to tick because of this decision that you've made. Because of bad rules writing. Anyway, that's it for me. Overall, this Legion rating is very poor. Very poor Legion. Lots of micromanagement as well of those psychic powers. Like having to remember that you've got to roll perils checks on, or psychic checks on every one of your units for their cults, where the cults used to be here's your buff. Here's your bonus to your squad. And knowing that only is affecting your infantry and cavalry, there are so many units that aren't going to get an effect from it. Just so situational, just so badly written, and it's all that micromanaging intensity that was in the last edition that people hated with Psychers. It's still there in the Thousand Suns now, just a lot of micromanaging. And it's not rewarding micromanagement where it's like, oh, I pulled off the perfect cult on 4 of my units this turn, turn the game around. It's not going to happen. The buffs are too minor. And the consequences for screwing it up are so bad, you don't want to do it. But, maybe there's Thousand Suns players out there who disagree with me, because I get rules wrong. It happens, guys. It's a new edition, and I'm learning it too. But as I read it, this Legion is just terrible. But saved from total obsolescence by the fact that its characters are so goddamn powerful if you play them well. Anyway, back with the Outer Circle. Hope you got something out of the episode, and I'll see you all on the next one.